Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 169 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. In this episode, we're going to continue on our series on building a custom or your very own custom rifle. And in this one, we're going to talk about actions. Before we get started, I do want to say a quick thank you to a couple of our sponsors. MDT is a proud sponsor of the show, maker of great rifle chassis. They make them in lots of different makes and models, including the Oryx, which we think is one of the most unsung heroes of the chassis market. We have built several of them over the past several weeks. Customers love them. They're very inexpensive for the quality of chassis that they are. I say they're probably one of the best chassis for under $1,000 you can buy. They retail for about $439. You can pick them up at MDT. You can contact us here. We'd gladly help you out. But if you want to upgrade your rifle and you want to get it to fit you properly, a great way to do that is by upgrading your stock. So if you want to upgrade your stock and look at all the great selections MDT has to offer, you can stop over to mdttac.com. That's mdttac.com. We'd also like to thank TriggerTech. TriggerTech is the maker of fine rifle triggers. We recommend them for all of our rifles here. They make everything from single stage, two-stage, curved shoe, straight shoe for lots of different makes and models. They're very easy to install, and we will be doing a video on a TriggerTech installation later next week. And they're also end-user friendly to adjust. So if you want to upgrade your shooting game, you can do it by upgrading your trigger. And if you want to do that, we recommend the best, and that is TriggerTech. So stop over to triggertech.com. That's triggertech.com today. So when you get into building a custom rifle, and this is Wolf Precision's Custom Rifle Building Podcast, the one thing that always comes up is receivers. And the reason that this is the first one that we're going to dive into is we want to talk about the difference between the price and the cost, and talk a little bit about the receivers that we use and then how to choose the proper one. You know, we spend a lot of time on the phone talking to customers, talking about the different types and maybe the applications of the different receivers, and then where it might fit best and what they're going to use it for. So we're going to touch base on all of the receivers that we offer and sort of give you the insight as to what the average customer might be looking for that particular receiver for. So to start this off, let's just talk about Bat Machine Company. Bat Machine Company has been around for many decades. They are one of the oldest action makers in the country as far as custom actions go. They own King of 2 Mile. They own Bentrust. They own almost everything and anything that has to do with precision, and that's because of quality. Now, over the years, you've got influencers and you've got a lot of best practices popping up in making custom actions. And I always warn and talk about the fact that just because everything looks the same doesn't mean they are. And receivers are sort of funny. You can line up 13 rifles in a row and you probably couldn't pick out which receiver was the quality receiver. And even if you picked it up and held it up close until you started running the bolt, making some measurements, you still probably couldn't do that. We offer Bat Machine actions for a reason, and they are the best, but they are the best at consistency as well. And here's where value, price, and cost come into play. We have been using Bat actions here for 2 decades. The reason I started using Bat actions is because they hold their actions to tolerances that we would traditionally do when we true a Remington 700 action or trying to make a Bentrust action. There's a lot of key things that come into play when you want to talk about what makes an action or even a rifle accurate. And the heart of it is the receiver. It's the bolt bore raceway clearances. It's how much slop you have in a bolt bore raceway. In other words, how much the bolt can move up and down because it removes lugs from contacting or contacting squarely. Then you have the consistency from the receiver face to the bolt face. All of these dimensions are very, very critical that not only are they straight and true, but they're not warped in any type of the processes as well, which is really common. You can search on YouTube and find Remington 700s that were torn apart and they can roll the round receiver across the table and it wobbles. That's crazy, but it warped in the heat treat process. When I first reached out to Bat Machine and we came out with the first Bat Tactical, we called it, the idea behind it is to take one of their VRs or HRs, which were not 700 clones at the time, and bring them into our market. Now, long before that, we actually had a bench rest receiver here. And I will tell you that it is the finest receiver I ever laid my hands on. I mean, everybody that touched it, everybody that worked with it, everybody who knows who BAT is like, wow, that's a BAT action. That means something to a lot of people that focus on quality. So when we decided that, hey, look, it makes no sense to take these actions that are just absolutely a train wreck and trying to spend 3 to 5 days churning them up to bring them up to these types of tolerances, as well as spending, $700-800 of the customer's hard-earned money, only to still wind up with a true Remington 700 that has no resale value. Even though that we spent a lot of time building quality receivers, the resale value to other people doesn't mean much if they don't know who you are. And a lot of times they sort of look at it skeptical. Is it good? Is it better? Or is it worse than factory, right? So we spent a lot of time talking to BAT and saying, hey, look, you guys build the best. Let's bring it into the tactical market. Let's take what you do and all of the other receivers that you make, and let's bring those clearances and tolerances because they mirror what we do here. And let's just make a 700 clone. It's exactly the way that we would build it. It's exactly how we would sleeve a bolt and the clearances that we want. So why reinvent the wheel? They already have the processes in making a world-class receiver. That started, and we've been going strong ever since. So this is about 14 years now. We're going on pretty close, maybe a little longer, on the applications of bringing the 700 clones to market. Now, since then, you see a lot of different bats coming on. So you've got stuff like the Bumblebee, which is a very similar 700 clone, although it's a flat bottom. You've got the Igniter, which was originally called a BT, and that was our Remington 700 clone with a double-pinned aluminum rail to reduce weight and really weight cuts, to basically take our tactical receiver and make it into a hunting action. Now that has morphed into the Igniter, which is now a standard receiver that they produce at quantity, which is really cool. And then we now have the BAT Tactical Elite, which is more flats machined into the side, a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, a little bit heavier, a little bit more rigidity. And then we have the long action versions of the same. And then you have other takeoffs that other people are doing with BAT that's sort of their technique or their click or something that they're trying to do. But still, the reason we choose BAT Machine and the reason we have been with them for nearly 20 years as far as friends and starting to do business with is because not only they are the best building what they do, but they're the best of consistently delivering that quality. Now, you'll hear people say, and this started off early, where people always try to come up with something to separate themselves from their competition, right? And so BAT is really, really famous in the bench rest and long range and 1,000-yard bench rest and King of 2 Mile. But you'll hear people say, especially other action makers, well, you don't want a bench rest action in the tactical market because, at dirt and debris, and we keep our bolt bore raceways more open or more clearance because we need to allow for room for dirt and debris. It's all nonsense. It is designed to plant that seed in your mind that they are doing something to make it more of a field-worthy receiver when they're selling you a way that they can build the receiver cheaper with looser tolerances and giving you the excuse as to why they want to do it. It's hogwash. So the first BAT tactical action that we brought here was serial number 001. In 2012, I won the 3-day Allegheny Sniper Challenge with that receiver. In dirt, debris, rain, sand, everything. I never wiped the bolt down. I never cleaned the gun. Won the match. When we were testing it here, even on the flutes and stuff, we were taking things like powder bow rosin, which is really sticky, and we were feeding it into the action like a powder, and we kept working the bolt and working the bolt and that bolt would run up into the point to where we could no longer pack any more in it. That is because the bolt bore raceway and the bolt body itself are perfectly true and aligned with each other, and neither is warped. When you have a very straight bolt bore raceway and very straight and good tolerances, the bolt will run straight down. If you have any warpage or loose tolerances, what happens is the bolt wants to kick sideways and it will bind. So if it's oversized, it will bind the bolt bore raceway, or the bolt's too small, or if either are warped. Like we've had other receivers here. And by the way, the second part of this getting the bats here was we had customers sending us their custom actions. And I got sick and tired of spending, honest to God here, like hours truing $1,300 custom actions, lapping lugs because the lugs do not have good contact. I mean, I can give you a list of things that I was just like, why am I as a gunsmith having to spend hours of my time fixing another receiver that's supposed to be custom, and I can't charge the customer for it? Like, I'm going to call the customer and say, hey, yeah, you bought this really expensive action and I need the gunsmith on it. Well, he's going to call that person up and everybody's going to come unglued. And of course, they're going to say there's nothing wrong with the receivers. They're built that way, right? But I know in the end, I'm on the hook because if I deliver that rifle and it doesn't shoot, it's my name on it, right? And so I would take the time to actually true a custom action. This is where I drew the line and said, that's it. You know, we are now going to go ahead and I'm going to reach out to BAT and see if we just can't open that line of communication up and make a 700 clone BAT action the way it's supposed to be made and have a receiver here the way it's supposed to be made every single time. The other thing you have to be careful of is your influencers, your paid promotions, your paid shooters, your sponsored shooters. Like, we fell victim to it just last month. We bought a Bambu Lab 3D printer. One of our tech guys here really liked it, did some research, said, hey, you know, this thing's really catching on. There's a lot of people. It's garbage. It's absolutely garbage. And here we are a month later trying to send this thing back. That's terrible because now all of a sudden the truth's coming out. It's in all the customers' hands. They're all having issues with it. Their customer service is terrible. I sometimes let decisions like this up to the tech guys here because they know best. I'm not a 3D printer guy. I can't tell you the first thing about them. I've never really ran one. But that said, they come back and said, yeah, we sort of been hoodwinked. This thing is nowhere living up to its name. And we sort of fell victim like everybody else does. We watched as many YouTube videos as we could. We tried to Google as many reviews as we could. But it hadn't been out long enough for the customer reviews to start coming back. Well, here we are, a month in. And same thing happens when you start looking at custom receivers. The entire internet is packed with the top 30% of the reviews that you see are almost paid advertisement. You know, one of my favorites would be the top 10 whatever in PRS or the top 10 this. You know, I don't care what that is. The reason being is because most of those are sponsored shooters. I want to know what the top 10 in their home safe that they spent their own hard-earned money on, not what somebody's paying them $30,000, $50,000, and $100,000 a year to shoot. Of course, they're going to say that's great. And it stacks the deck. One of the things is the top components. So if you look at the top components, you'll see one that's like the top particular component. Well, one of the reasons it's one of the top and most used in PRS is because it's the most given away. So they give them away at a lot of different matches. They stack the deck and then they use that for advertisement, making or giving that false appearance that this is the best because everybody's using it and I should use it because everybody else is using it. So be really careful on the advertisement part of it because just because what you're reading on the internet doesn't mean it's true. And a lot of times those numbers are skewed. What I want to know is what did they go spend their own hard-earned money on, that they took the cash out of their pocket, that's their favorite gun in the back of the safe that they can't take to a range. I am privy to a gentleman that actually have won PRS series. We've even had some of our alumni win the PRS series, win the senior division. But in talking with these guys, you'll see that they say that they have other rifles and they actually prefer under the radar other rifles. Hey, I actually like the stock a little bit better, or I sort of like this action a little bit, but they're not paid to do that, right? That's in their safe. That's their personal rifle, but it's not the one that they're bringing out on the firing line winning matches with. So you have to be careful. The other part to this when we get into the receivers is talking value, price, and cost. So yes, it's funny that, you know, we'll spend an extra $5 for a craft beer, but when it comes to spending an extra $200 as a receiver, some guys sort of get weird with this, right? They don't see the cost associated with or the value in it. All as they see is a wrench, right? Be really careful when you're buying stuff that A, you don't buy a wrench that's a Harbor Freight wrench that's expensive, and also be careful that you don't buy it just because, hey, it's just a wrench and there's 500 that it's just meant to turn a nut, right? So be careful and do your homework and make sure that A, you're buying quality, you know, make sure their bolt bore raceway clearances are correct. Make sure they've got good contact on both lugs, which BAT is phenomenal for. So if you run a BAT action and you look at the back of both your lugs, you'll see them both worn. That means both lugs are making contact. That is huge, and it's not common. So you've got the price, you've got the value or perceived value, what you're willing to pay for it. But now here's the kicker, is nobody ever figures in the cost. And that cost is getting a rifle that either has a flyer, that has random good days and bad days, one that ever so slightly is jamming up all the time, one that, I can just give you a laundry list of things that is the cost to you, the shooter, of you eventually not getting the full 100% package that you were looking for. The rifle's performing at 70, 80, or even 90% of your expectations, but not really the whole way there. And the action is a big part of this. Now, we don't make a lot of money off of Bat Machine receivers. There isn't a lot of markup on them at all. They are very expensive to make, very expensive to make. We use them because they're the best. They're the best at delivering not just the quality, but the consistent high quality, the perfection. So, for example, we talked about in a previous podcast, you have Bagheera, who is somebody did a factory tour, and they were saying that they had 9 different ground recoil lugs somewhere in the video about how they had space to barrels. I can take any Bat Action we've ever sold and put one of our aces on it, and it will headspace. No ground recoil lugs. That's how good they are. That is not common. And we're not talking plus or minus 1 thou, which is you'll see now that, hey, we can do prefits because we're plus or minus 1 thou. But if the barrel's plus or minus 1 thou and the action's plus or minus 1 thou, that's the difference between passing and failing, right? Bat holds 2 10,000s to 3 10,000s. 3 times, 4 times that. And that's why they work. And this is why we choose them. So right out of the gate, we use Bat Machine on all of our custom rifles. And I just want to take a couple minutes to explain why and how important it really is to the end of the road when the rifle actually gets delivered to the customer. Now, let's talk about the different models that you can choose from. So you're going to build a custom rifle. We're going to sit down and we're going to talk about all these different components, and we're going to try to figure out what's the best fit for you. So let's go through what we consider the receiver. So right out of the gate, if you're shooting competition, or if you're going to shoot PRS, or if it is your long-range gun, I always recommend the Bat Tactical Elite. It has a machined-in rail. It has a machined-in recoil lug. It is a little bit heavier. It is got top strap, adds a lot of rigidity. It is a true match receiver. The reason I believe I would choose this one is because there's less moving parts. So the rail is now part of the receiver, so you're missing the rail and the 4 screws that attach it. That's 5 less moving parts on the receiver. It's more rigid. It's more robust. It's going to take the beatings over and over and over and over again without any issues whatsoever. Now, they're a little more expensive. They retail for about $1,635 at the time of this podcast, but they are the best. Then from there, we look at the igniter. The igniter was born out of the BT, which was originally the hunting version of our Elite. And it was a Remington 700 clone with a built-in recoil lug. That is really important on a receiver. You want the built-in recoil lug. That is what locks those together. That's what locks up in your stock. And that's what sets your headspace perfectly every single time. But we removed the rail and put a double pinned rail and had a couple more relief cuts in the port or the opening. And our effort was to come up with a less expensive receiver because it's turned rather than milled. So it's a Remington 700 round receiver from the back of the recoil lug back. So it's a little bit easier to machine, a little bit more effective to make. And then a double pinned, 4-screwed aluminum one-piece rail on top. That was our original BT or hunting action, and now it's become standardized as the igniter. That receiver is so important because it holds the same clearances and tolerances as the Bat Tactical Elite. It actually uses the same exact bolt, firing pin, bolt handle. All of that is the same. It's just a little bit less expensive to make because of the processes for the actual receiver itself. So for me, if it was a dual-purpose rifle, or if you needed to have some extra funds to put towards other parts of the rifle, I love the igniter. I had it on my personal hunting rifle for the last 7 years. It's been a BT, which was the predecessor to the igniter, or very similar in how the new igniter is set, and no issues whatsoever. I'm not worried about the rail loosen up. I've never had a problem with it. We've had them here at our shooting school, but they cost nearly $500 less. That's a lot of savings that you can put towards other parts and pieces. So I consider that a dual purpose receiver. I consider that a great option for a hunting receiver. So it's a little bit lighter. It's going to actually help with the overall weight of the rifle, and it allows you to put some more money towards other parts and pieces and still get the bat performance out of it. Then you get into the Bumblebee and the Vampire. Now, these are really interesting. Bruce has been working on these for years, and I mean years. I remember the last NRA annual right before COVID hit, and I think it was in 2019. Bruce had one of the very first prototypes there at the show. He was helping me at the show with our booth. And it's an aluminum receiver. It's stronger than titanium. It's a 700 footprint in a way that it's a flat bottom, but it's also very rigid, built-in Picatinny rail, built-in recoil lug. Excellent, excellent hunting receiver if you're looking to save about 6 ounces or so on an action. And again, probably one of the best overthought ways of building one I've ever seen. And then on top of that, the accuracy's just been incredible. I actually changed my hunting rifle over to one because I'm trying to make a little bit lighter of a rifle. And I'm trying to showcase, hey, how light can we actually make this? So when you make that combination of the Bumblebee with a magnesium XLR chassis, something like that, it really makes a difference. And now we're getting into rifles that we can drop down to 7 and even to the 6 pound mark, which I find to be pretty amazing. And then you've got the Vampire, which is the long action version of the Bumblebee. Now, currently we only offer the Ace in the 7 PRC in the Vampire. It is a long action. It's a very similar threads to the actual Bat Tactical Elite or their other short actions. So the threads on a standard long action bat are a little bit different than what they are on the Vampire. And so we just released the 7 PRC for the Vampire. But again, if you're looking for super rigidity, super quality, and saving 6-7 ounces right out of the gate on your rifle, great way to go. Now, it doesn't stop there. The one thing I want to talk about here real quick is just how ingenious some of the parts and pieces are on bats. So one of the reasons why I like them so much is just that consistency of super high quality, the best, the consistency of the head spacing, but also you can change out the bolt faces to accommodate different calibers. So keep in mind, we've always been about trying to get a system that works and plays well together without a lot of customization, no custom gunsmithing. So you can take your short action igniter that's built in 6.5 Creedmoor, and let's just say your daughter wants to go shoot. You can now take your bolt face, change it to a 223, change out your barrel and your ace, and you now got a 223 rifle to go and shoot, and it will shoot exactly like as if it was a brand new custom rifle. Same thing if you wanted to go and change to a PRC. So let's just say you're going on a bear hunt, you want something with a little more oomph behind it, and you want to change up to a Magnum. You can change the bolt head, change the chamber, change the barrel, and now you've changed your 6.5 match gun into a 6.5 PRC for hunting. You can change the barrel weight. You can change from carbon to stainless. And so for me, the utilitarian part of the rifle is being able to change out and swap out these parts and pieces to put it into service for something else that you need a good quality rifle for, rather than going out and buying another rifle. So you've shot matches all summer long with your match gun. You love it. The piece is performing great. Why not swap out 3 parts on it and turn it into your deer rifle? If you're not worried about weight, throw a carbon barrel on it, change the caliber out, remove your weights out of your stock, and you've got a decent weight, long-range hunting rifle. If you're worried about weight, swap out your stock to an HNT 26, put a carbon barrel on it, put a smaller scope on it, and now you've got yourself a really lightweight hunting rifle. So for me, it's always been the value part of it is in the long-term finished product. You're able to now not just have the best rifle, but then be able to change it up for different services and parts. So yeah, you spend a little bit more money up front, which now with our new rifle kit systems, I don't think that's the case at all. I think we're thousands of dollars less than any competitor on the market with the very best, not just in components, but even in technology on how we build. But now you can take that rifle and you can change it up to things with just a minute changes of some parts. And I think that's the value-added proposition. The icing on the cake is that it doesn't need to leave your possession. It doesn't need to leave your house. You can now go on and you can build a rifle and change it up to your particular needs and actually take that rifle, put it right back into service as a hunting rifle, as a match rifle, as a varmint rifle, whatever you need it to be. So one of the last things to touch base on here is just when we keep moving forward, we just launched our, I guess it would be rifle maintenance and gunsmithing page, where we're going to go over all the parts and pieces on how we build, how we clean, how we maintain, all the common things we spend a lot of time talking to on customers. It's going to be in video format. It's going to be free. You can stop over to YouTube and start following it now. We just posted up a couple videos, but eventually we'll probably have close to 40 to 50 videos on there showing all of these things that we can do with the rifles to change them up, to modify them, to put them back into service. Well, we consider everything from an armorer's course to an introductory course. So I am looking at it from the perspective as that you, the shooter, or brand new to the sport, you've never done this before, you know nothing about rifles. And I'm going to start with, okay, what do you really need to know? Well, how do you take your bolt out? How do you clean the rifle? How do you put your optics on? How do you tighten your action screws? We're going to go over not only advanced stuff, but we're also going to go over a lot of basics that I think are a real value to new people coming into our sport, as well as coming into our industry. Now, before we continue on, I do want to say a quick thank you to Krieger Barrels. Krieger is the maker of fine cut rifle barrels. They are made in the great state of Wisconsin. They are a family-owned and operated business as well, which I find that to be really important. And they make some of the best rifles in the world. They are world-renowned for their quality. They are actually very well sought after. And with lead times for us, we're setting at 9 months when we order our barrels. They have a new program called Krieger Direct, where you can log on and purchase your barrel and have it in as little as 2 to 3 days. This is something that they changed so customers didn't have to stand in line behind dealers and builders like us. So you can stop over to Krieger Barrels and look at Krieger Direct. You can order your custom barrel and have it in as little as 2 to 3 business days. So if you want the best and you need it now, stop over at KriegerBarrels.com. That's KriegerBarrels.com. So in the next podcast, we're going to dive into triggers. One of the things when we talk about our build kits here is they are missing the trigger. You're going to have to install your own trigger, and we are going to have videos being released on the installation part. But I want to walk you through the process that we used in selecting the triggers that we use here and that we have used here in the past, and ones that we recommend to customers that they purchase when they're buying their rifles. And I want to go over some of the reasons why. Some of them I think are very important, and not just on the safety part of it, but the consistency, the end user adjustability, just a lot of things. We talk about this at the shooting school a lot. So we'll be teaching a shooting school coming up here tomorrow. It starts, and one of the things in the shooting school is we'll actually take probably a good 30, 40 minutes and not just talk about trigger and trigger pulling, but also about why it's so important to use a good quality and safe trigger. So we're going to dive into triggers next. We're going to talk a little bit about why we selected Trigger Tech as our recommendation, and then some things to think about when you're purchasing your trigger to start your custom rifle. Also, we are posting up videos live. We have several videos up on our beginning of our maintenance and rifle building series. You can stop over to YouTube. Stop over to Patreon if you want to support the show. It's $3 a month and join our Wolf Pack. We really appreciate that as well. And then also, if you know anybody that enjoys shooting or enjoys commentary like this and would like to share our podcast, we really appreciate you doing so. And if you would like to leave a nice comment, that helps us a lot in our ratings and standings as well. So thank you everybody for taking the time to join us on the podcast. We really appreciate it. The next podcast we're going to dive into is triggers. We're looking forward to having you there. My name is Jamie Dotson. I am your host, and you're listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.